have no other king but King Jesus.
Amen.
And I would ask you to stand with me if you can. If you can't, that's all right too. In the honor of the reading of God's Word. Sharing from Acts chapter 5, beginning at verse 26, and I'm reading from the Atkin Bible, the Bible of the Revolution. Then went the captain with the officers and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should have been stoned. And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, Did not we straitly command you that you should not teach in this name? And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, We ought to obey God rather than man. And then from 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17, Now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Lord is, there is liberty. You can be seated. Thank you. Now, I've come dressed in colonial clothing to remind us of the original principles of the founding of our constitutional republic. No divine right kings here. No tyrants will be tolerated or invited. Now, as Diane shared with you, the original intent of the Bill of Rights, its importance then and now, Pastor Lear will share. Our founding father, James Madison, cleverly crafted the American Bill of Rights to limit the government power while strengthening the citizen-government relationship established by the Declaration of Independence. Our rights come from the God of the Bible, not the good intentions of an overreaching government on whatever tier. Our founders and framers understood that from history and from Scripture. Lex Rex, not Rex Lex. The rule of law, not the rule of a whimsical or otherwise king. The supreme law of the land. September 17th, 1787, the original body of the Constitution. December 15th, 1791, the Bill of Rights. You see, it took that long, almost 4 years, for the Bill of Rights to come about. The Anti-Federalists opposed Madison because he was a Federalist, but also because they realized that his plan to institute guarantees of personal liberties would appease many of their constituents and remove much of the impetus for the more sweeping changes they sought, specifically concerning the judiciary and direct taxation. In the end, the Federalists were not opposed to such guarantees. They merely thought it inconceivable that the federal government, constructed as it was, would abuse its power. The amendments that eventually passed the House and Senate were limited to those guaranteeing personal liberty. 12 were sent to the state legislatures for ratification, and 10 of these were ratified and became the Bill of Rights we have today. Virginia was the last state to approve them, and Madison again had to fight anti-federalists led by Patrick Henry, who still wanted further limitations to the power of the federal government. The creation of the nation's founding documents has been justly called a miracle. But this provides insight into the remarkable statecraft that melded high principle with political necessity and forged a nation. George Mason, the framer who refused to sign the Constitution, the eyes of the United States are turned upon this assembly and their expectations raised to a very anxious degree. May God grant that we may be able to gratify them by establishing a wise and just government. This was a letter he wrote to his son. Others who would not sign the Constitution without a Bill of Rights: Elbridge Gerry, Edmund Randolph, Patrick Henry, and Samuel Adams. Gerry feared that the central government set up by the Constitution would become dangerously powerful. Something must be done, or we shall disappoint not only America, but the whole world, he said. If men of wisdom, of moderation and temperance, of patience, fortitude, and perseverance, of sobriety and true republican simplicity of manners, of zeal for the honor of the Supreme Being and the welfare of the Commonwealth, if men possessed of these other excellent qualities are chosen to fill the seats of government, we may expect that our affairs will rest upon a solid and permanent foundation. That was said by Samuel Adams. There lies the problem we face now. Principles of the Constitution include checks and balances, individual rights, liberty, limited government, natural rights theory, republican government, and popular sovereignty. Antecedent documents to the Constitution include the political writings about natural rights theory and forms of government by John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and Montesquieu, and English charters of liberty, including the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights. James Madison saw one important difference between those documents and the Constitution, however. In Europe, he said, charters of liberty have been granted by power. America has set the example of characters and charters of power granted by liberty. Let me say that again. Of charters of power granted by liberty. Whenever government is found inadequate to preserve the liberty and property of the people, they have an indubitable right to alter it to fulfill those purposes. Legislators, in their legislative capacity, cannot alter the Constitution, for they are hired servants of the people to act within the limits of the Constitution. The question is, are the rights of conscience alienable or inalienable? The word conscience signifies common science, a court of judicature that the Almighty has erected in every human heart, a censor of morals over all his actions. Conscience will ever judge right when it is rightly informed and speak the truth when it understands it. Pastor John Leland said that, and he was very influential on both Madison and Jefferson. The Bill of Rights is the single most powerful and successful assertion of individual rights and liberty ever written. Only one of history's most important and influential documents. It truly is. Its ingenious balance of personal freedoms and political principles has power and proven dynamic and durable for over 2 centuries, making the adoption of a Bill of Rights the basic demand of people everywhere seeking freedom from oppression. Anti-Federalists foresaw the danger of power concentrating. Notable anti-Federalists included Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, George Mason, Richard Henry Lee, Robert Yates, James Monroe, George Clinton, Langdon Smith, Arthur Fenner, James Winthrop, Luther Martin, and James and Mercy Warren. So this new creation stood unique, a system of self-government by the consent of the governed. By the consent of the governed. And with union. A constitutional republic with the individual liberty, elected representatives, and limited government. A government with its powers nailed down, fastened and combined to a proper defense of the individual, to his pursuits of life, liberty, property, and happiness. Thus, inalienable rights endowed by our Creator. A republic in which the power to govern was checked and balanced by the devices designed to stop the tyrant in his tracks. The Sons of Liberty joined to erect 4 fences around their government, so it could not be out of hand or out of bounds. The executive, the legislative, the judicial, and the individual. Each was to be a check or a balance on the other. After God, the individual came first. Only by his consent could government govern, and then only to protect life, liberty, and property, not just his, but all men equally. The new nation, a republic, not a democracy, and so their founding fathers created a republic, not a democracy, where half plus one can squash the rest, where a fanatical majority can deprive the individual of his rights, life, his property. Not for these men. They knew democracy with its excesses, its leveling down process, its inherent seeds of destruction. They knew Plato's warning that unrestricted democracy must result in dictatorship. And what are we seeing today all over the world and in America? The principles of society are the laws which Almighty God has established in the moral world and made necessary to be observed by mankind in order to promote their true happiness in their transactions and relationships. They are as fixed and unchangeable as the laws which operate in the natural world. The end, therefore, and nature of civil government imply that it must have for its foundation the principles and laws of truth, justice, and righteousness, mercy, and the fear of God, or it can never advance the happiness of mankind. The mere politician who has no fear of God before his eyes may consider them, but to the enlightened and religious mind, they are moral laws in a higher sense, laws of our Creator. The same virtue and integrity, truth, justice, and honor, which we venerate in a private character, must be found in the public administration, and generally prevailing among people or a state cannot be united, peaceful and happy, and respectful in the world. And that was said by Pastor Eliezer Goodrich, who influenced the founding fathers. President 34, Dwight Eisenhower, warned, and it was in Time magazine, October 13, 1952, the Bill of Rights contains no grant of privilege for a group of people to destroy the Bill of Rights. A group dedicated to the ultimate destruction of all civil liberties cannot be allowed to claim civil liberties as its privileged sanctuary from which to carry on subversion of the government. These amendments were included and intended to be handcuffs or limitations on the power of the new federal government. The preamble of the Bill of Rights explained the states concerned the federal government might abuse its power. The convention of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction of abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added as amendments to the Constitution of the United States. As Congress was the branch of government where laws were to be written, it is restricted by these amendments. Be not intimidated, nor suffer yourselves to be wheedled out of your liberties by any pretense of politeness, delicacy, or decency. They are often used and are but 3 different names for hypocrisy, chicanery, and cowardice. That's said by John Adams. James Madison similarly declared, government is instituted to protect property of every sort. Conscience is the most sacred of all property. Blackstone wrote in his commentaries on the law, "The principal aim of society is to protect individuals in the enjoyment of those absolute rights which were vested in them by the immutable laws of nature. It is better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer." Of great importance to the public is the preservation of this personal liberty. For if once it were left in the power of any, the highest magistrate, to imprison arbitrarily whomever he or his officers thought proper, there would soon be an end of all other rights and immunities. And of course, these things refer to certain amendments in the Bill of Rights. There is nothing which so generally strikes the imagination and engages the affections of mankind as that sole and despotic dominion which one claims and exercises over the external things of the world in total exclusion of the right of any other individual in the universe. And this is what Alexander Hamilton, who along with James Madison assisted Washington in drafting his farewell address, had previously said in Federalist number 78. The representatives of the people, Congress, may not violate the Constitution even if a majority of their constituents want them to. Until the people have, by some solemn and authoritative act, annulled or charged and changed the established form, it is binding upon themselves collectively as well as individually, and no presumption or even knowledge of their sentiments can warrant their representatives in a departure from it prior to such an act. That is fifth paragraph from the end. Our Constitution isn't defective. It's ignored. Our Constitution isn't defective, it's ignored. Our Constitution is a 5,000-year miracle. Our problem is most everyone ignores it. The solution is to dust it off, read it, learn it, and enforce it. Downsize the federal government to its enumerated powers. Stability in government is essential to the national character and to the advantages annexed to it, as well as that repose, confidence in the minds of the people, which are among the chief blessings of civil society. James Madison, 1788. Our founding fathers purposely and carefully established a constitutional or compactual republic. The reason's twofold. First, a republic is the best functional way to practice democratic principles through a representative government, with any large population representation necessary to allow most of the citizenry to focus on their daily lives and working within the economy, and the elected few to represent the interests of their constituents. But since even a republic can fall into despotism, just as a democracy, the critical component is establishing a social compact or constitution. A social compact established the moral agreement, while a constitution institutes the desired structure and fundamental restrictions which allow a limited government to best serve the people, allow the utmost level of liberty, freedom, and prosperity. The Constitution of the United States was underpinned by Christian principles and values and rested upon the statement in the Declaration of Independence, they, we the people, are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Every American can turn for solace and consolation to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States with the assurance and confidence that these two great charters of freedom and justice remain firm and unshaken. The Federal Compact was established to protect the liberty of the citizenry of America. Unless liberty was carefully protected, and only then could American exceptionalism flourish. For this reason, liberty is the divine ingredient in the great experiment. The great experiment is God-centered, and also exactly why our individuality is also to be God-centered. This steadfastly protects us from despots. It created an experiment of divine providence. When I was a boy growing up, people gave my father at Christmas time in particular a variety of different gifts. One of them that they gifted him with was a copy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And sad to say that I had never read it. I'm not even sure if I read it then, if I would have understood it. I would hope I would. It's not really that difficult to understand. But I saw it there for years and years and years until later the light came on. I distribute across the country this little card called mybillofrights.org. They actually have a monument out in Oklahoma that they put up, the Bill of Rights, so more and more people, and people in this room, Diane being one, and Paul, and Pat, and Hal, and others, Janine, Ellen in the back, Harriet, have been involved for years in these very things. And I certainly salute them for that. Someone has stolen my country, our country, and we want her back now. And of course, being not politically correct, nor ever trying to be politically correct, I want to wish everybody in here Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas.
And God bless the American Constitutional Republic.
Amen.